Hi there, so in today's video we're going to be going through everything you need to know about emergency funds. Firstly, I'll be explaining what is an emergency fund. Secondly, I'll be explaining why you need an emergency fund. Thirdly, I'll be explaining how much you should keep in your emergency fund. Fourthly, I'll be going through where you should keep your emergency fund. And fifthly, we will be explaining how you can start saving your emergency fund. And to do that, I've got a 5-step process that I will take you through step by step. That'll be at the end of the video. And if you implement that, you'll be able to start work on your very own emergency fund starting right now, today. So grab yourself a cuppa, let's get ready, let's go for this. If you're new to this channel, welcome, nice to meet you. My name's Andy, and on this channel I talk about money and success. If you're interested in either of those two topics, or just happen to like this channel at all, please do me a big favour and hit that subscribe button down below, hit the notification bell, then you get notified every time I release a video. Thank you. Let's dive right in. So the first question I promised to answer was, what is an emergency fund? An emergency fund, put very simply, is a buffer, an amount of money that you've got set aside for emergencies, exactly what it says on the tin. So if you have your roof leak or something like that, boom, that's what your emergency fund is for. You may be surprised to hear that in Britain, literally 15% of people have no savings at all. In America, it's even worse, with 20% of people not having any savings at all. So in Britain, that's literally 1 in 7 people has no savings set aside, and in America it's 1 in 5 people with no savings at all set aside. So if there was a problem, financially ruined. That leads me very nicely on to why you need an emergency account. So on to question number 2. Why do you need an emergency account? Well, apart from the fact you don't want to be part of those statistics that I just explained to you earlier, I've made me a little list. So let me go through this with you now. Obviously, in case of an emergency. So if you have a car, your car breaks down, you can't get to work, that would constitute as an emergency. If, for example, you lose your job, I would count that as an emergency too. You still have rent to pay, mortgage to pay, bills to pay, water to pay, food that needs to go in your belly. You probably need some clothes. It's an emergency. When you don't lose your job, that constitutes an emergency. Things that don't constitute an emergency are going on holiday, having takeaways, buying new gadgets, okay? If you happen to have the latest iPhone, the latest iPad, or, gadgets, those things are not what your emergency fund is for. Let me get that very clear right now. Your emergency fund is for exactly what we're discussing here, emergencies. In a later video, I will explain how to make sure you have the money to buy all the nice toys that you want. But for the purpose of this video, we're just talking about an emergency fund. So that is for emergencies. So it's literally in case you lose your job, in case you suddenly get an unexpected, extremely large bill, you need to be able to have some pot of gold that you can draw upon. That is what your emergency fund is for. Your fridge freezer breaks, for example, in case you have a hole in the roof and it needs to be repaired, and so on. So your emergency fund is exactly that. Anything that goes wrong, you have that buffer to sit on. So that covers why you need an emergency fund. Everybody should have one. Make sure you get an emergency fund set up. And don't worry, remember in step 5, I'm going to go through exactly how you can save your emergency fund. And I'm going to give you 5 steps that are going to allow you to be able to straight away start setting up your emergency fund. And don't worry about it if you want to know where, that comes in step 4. We're going to cover where. But right now, let's get on to step 3, or answer to question 3, which is, how much should you have saved in your emergency fund? How much should you have saved in your emergency fund? Most experts seem to agree you should have between 3 and 6 months worth of savings saved up in your emergency fund. I would argue maybe a little bit longer, as much as 2 years worth, to be honest with you, but at least 3 months. If you haven't got 3 months worth of essential living expenses saved up and put in a savings account somewhere safe that you can draw upon, you don't have an emergency fund. That's what you need to do, and that should be your first target, okay? So that's where you want to be aiming for. Like I say, as a minimum, 3 months is recommended. So if you don't have an emergency fund, it's essentially you start one today. Where to keep your emergency fund? I would actually recommend you simply keep it in a high interest, instant access savings account. Remember, it is for emergencies, so you are going to need access to this money quickly. It's not money you're going to lock away that you can't touch. You need to be able to get to it. If your car breaks down, you need that money straight away. If you lose your job, you're going to need that money straight away. Remember, it's for emergency. That said, you are going to need a certain amount of discipline not to spend that money, because it's going to be there and it's going to be tempting. The new iPhone comes out, a new computer comes out, a new big TV comes out, and you think, oh, I'd like that. No, that's not what that money is for. We'll set up separate savings accounts for that. And you should, by the way, and I'll go through all of that in other videos, but this is an emergency account. It's purely for emergencies. That is it. Nothing else. Just emergencies. You know, if you get cancer, you need emergency treatment. That's what this money is for, okay? It's to make you better and let you sleep at night, you know? If anything goes wrong in your life, and there's all kind of things, and it's usually unexpected things as well. It's things that are hard to think of. So the emergency that happens, whilst I'm coming up with these ideas here, these aren't all the possible emergencies. It could be any one of a number of things, but you need the money, obviously. And remember that. When you get tempted to pull some money out of there, don't do it. Just put it in a high interest savings account. I've made a video about the highest interest savings account. I'll put a thing on the screen somewhere about that now. And so you can go and watch that, that's fine. But maybe watch that later, I don't know. Or come back to this video. But it's so important that you have it, instant access. High interest savings account is the best place to keep it. And as we covered in step 3, you want at least 3 months worth of essential savings set aside in your emergency fund. Ideally more, okay? But the level, you know, you have to decide what your comfortable level is. If you've got none at the moment, get 3 months worth set aside, and then you can maybe grow it from there. Now on to question number 5, which is how to save an emergency fund. Now, I promised you 5-step process for this, and I've got that. It's written right here, don't worry. So I'm going to go through the 5-step process that you need to be able to create an emergency fund, okay? So step number 1 is make a list of all of your expenses. This needs to be a total list of everything that you spend in a month. Look through your bank statements, literally get your bank statements, get your credit card statements if you've only got one bank account. We're going to be changing that. But if you've only got one bank account, grab that bank statement, go through that bank statement line by line and look at everything you spend. If you have a credit card, grab your credit card statement, go through there and look at everything you spend, okay? If you're someone who spends things in cash, literally get a little notebook, something like this, a little notebook, okay? And literally jot down everything that you spend in a month. That's what I need you to do. So jot down everything that you spend in a month. That's the purpose of the little notebook. If you happen to be spending things in cash, if you spend everything on cards, it's going to be easier because you can literally just look on your bank statement or on your credit card statement, and you will be able to very easily see how much you're spending each and every month. Okay, so that is step 1. Step 1 is to literally make a list of all of your living expenses, okay? So literally just make a list of everything, all expenses. Step 1, list everything. Step number 2, okay? So now step number 2 is you're going to review that list of expenses. So you have to go through it and literally mark down what was essential and what was not essential. So for example, essential expenses would include things like your rent, your mortgage, your utility bills, gas, water, electric, any local taxes that you have to pay, council tax, road tax, things like that, okay? Pension payments, fuel for your car, car services, car MOTs, new tyres for your car. These are essential. You need those things. Add those things together. That is going to give you a total number. Things that I don't want you to include in that list that are not essential, okay, is anything that you don't need. So eating out, if you're going to restaurants and you're spending money at restaurants, that is not essential spending. Going to the cinema, not essential spending. Takeaways, not essential spending. If you're not having a cup of coffee on the way to work every morning, that is not essential spending. You could have made it in a flask and taken it with you. It wasn't essential. That if your life depended on it, you could cut that out, okay? Basically anything that if your life depended on, you could cut out isn't essential, okay? So we want you to end up with just a list of just essential expenditure, okay? And that's what step 2 is. Make that list of essential expenditure by reviewing the list you created in step 1. I hope it's clear. Hope you've done that. If you need to pause the video, do that, and then come back and we'll carry on to step 3. Okay, so welcome back. So now on to step 3. Add up all of your essential expenses so that you have a list of all of the expenses that you have, and I just want that total figure. Now, your total figure could be 100, Could be 1,000, could be 2,000, doesn't matter, right? Whatever your essential figure is, literally write that figure down, okay? Because that gives you your 1 month's worth of essential expenses. And that's a really important figure, and you should actually pat yourself on the back. Most people haven't taken the time to do this, and that's why 98% of people never become financially free. 98%, that's right. It's insane, isn't it? Literally, you've taken a good step here, writing all that down, making that list, and coming up with your number for 1 month's worth of essential living expenses. So now we'll move on to step number 4, which is nice and simple. Multiply that number, which is your essential living costs, essentially. So multiply that figure by 3, and that will tell you how much money you need to save in order to have 3 months worth of living expenses set aside. Okay, so if you wanted to set aside 4 months worth, you would multiply the number by 4. If you wanted to have 5 months worth, you'd multiply it by 5. If you wanted 6 months worth, you'd multiply it by 6, and so on. Okay, now then, if you've got nothing at all, no savings at all, let's just start with 3. Work out what is 3 months worth. So take the figure that you calculated in step number 3, your monthly living expenses, multiply that by 3. Write that number down, okay? So if your living expenses was £1,000 per month, that multiplied by 3 is going to be £3,000 per month, okay? So whatever those living expenses are, multiply it by 3, and that will give you your starting target for your initial emergency account, which you can choose to grow later. But let's just get you to that first step first, okay? So now let's move on to step number 5. So if your living expenses was like my example of £1,000 per month, and you want to save 3 months worth, that would give you £3,000 worth you need to save. You've got £3,000 you need to save, and let's decide, this is what the step where you need to decide how long. So you decide a year. It's really simple. You literally take your figure, so whatever the figure was that you'd discovered in step 4, and you divide that figure, so your 3 months worth of living expenses, you divide that figure by 12, and that will give you a number. That number is the number you need to save each and every month. So for example, if your emergency fund amount was £3,000, you would divide that by 12, that would come out at £250, and you now know you need to put aside £250 per month into that high interest instant access savings account and never touch it. Simple, okay? And in a year's time, you will have done it. You will have your 3 months emergency account set up. You may then choose to keep adding to it, and if you do, obviously in 2 years' time, you will have 6 months worth saved up, and that's fine, okay? And it might be that 6 months is your happy number, and that's where you want to end at in the longer run, and then you might start diverting that money somewhere else. Okay, so now I know what you might be thinking, but Andy, I've not got £250 or whatever that number is spare. That's okay. You've got a number of options here, okay? Either you can cut some expenses out. So you add that list of essential living expenses and then the non-essential things. Have a look through the non-essential expenses, okay? You might find that you are completely wasting money. And I've got an example here. For example, say you're having a £3.50 cup of coffee every day, 5 days a week. If you cut that £3.50 cup of coffee out every day, that will literally save you £910 a year. Let that sink in a minute. £3.50 cup of coffee, 5 days a week, is 900. That's almost £1,000 in a year saved. That was easy, okay? Now let's imagine you're also having a takeaway once a week, and that's costing you £25 a week. Now imagine you completely cut that out. If you completely cut that out, that would save you £1,300 a year. Maybe you can't cut it out completely. Maybe you're like, but that's really too harsh. How about I just have a takeaway once a month? That's fine. If you have a takeaway once per month instead of once per week, not only will it be better for your waistline, you will save £1,000 per year, assuming it's £25 per takeaway. So you'll be quite surprised when you multiply the numbers up, just how quickly these things add up. So a little daily saving or a little weekly saving actually adds up to a large amount over the course of a year. So do the maths, get your calculator out and work that out. So that's option 1, is to cut your living expenses and cut out some of them non-essential things, which you've already identified. You did that earlier in an earlier step. And option number 2 is obviously to get an extra income, start a side hustle, start a side job, start a part-time job. There's many, many ways to make money nowadays. Making money nowadays, if you're in a developed country at least, is so easy. There's so many ways to make money. Let me give you a little example. Say you make just an extra £50 a week and you save that extra £50 a week. Now, most people Could earn an extra £50 a week, I would have thought. It's not particularly difficult. A Saturday morning job will probably do that. In the space of a year, that £50 per week, if you save that, that will be £2,600 over the course of the year. Now, if you were actually looking, like the example, to save 3,000, if that would happen to be your magic number, we've really cut that down now. I mean, literally, that is the bulk of that number saved just from that little old £50 a week, which is just from adding. If you do that and cut the coffee out as well, where's this end? It's amazing, isn't it? So hopefully that's given you some ideas of how you can do it. So I hope that helped and answered all your questions. If you have any more questions, please leave a comment down below. I wish you the best of luck setting up your emergency fund. I really do hope you found this video helpful. If you have, please do hit the subscribe button and check out my other videos. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.